Saludos a toda la afición de Lucha Libre Online. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y miren el enorme privilegio que tengo yo en la tarde de hoy. Gente, mi invitado especial, nuestro invitado especial de Florida para el mundo. Algunos lo conocen como Jim Steele. En Puerto Rico se conocía como Jungle Jim Steele, baby. Llega aquí a Lucha Libre Online por primera vez. Jim, it is a pleasure for us to have you as our guest. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. My pleasure too. Nice to meet you, and nice to be talking about pro wrestling again. It's I don't do much of it or at all, and I don't even really. If I'm home at that time on Monday, I might watch a little bit of it, but yeah, it's a missed passion, I guess.
Yeah, it's good to see you back on camera. Like we haven't seen many of Jungle Jim Steele since you retired. But I wanted to start this interview asking you, how did your passion for pro wrestling started? I mean, you started wrestling in the early 90s, but what match or wrestler or rivalry inspired you enough to do this?
Actually, that's funny that you asked that, because I was never a fan of wrestling. Really? As I was younger growing up. So I don't know. I guess I've seen it in the past when I was younger, just channel surfing through the 3 or 4 channels that we had back then. It might even be black and white, I'm not sure. But yeah, so most wrestlers, past and present, they were fans of it and grew up watching it and mimicking it and having little wrestling matches in their living room. I did not. I didn't start till later. I had some friends of mine that were wrestling and training, and they talked me into going down and training with them. And I didn't jump at the chance right away. It took them multiple attempts of trying to get me to come down, and I'm like, all right, sure, why not, let's go. And so I had a disadvantage because I had to start from beginning. I didn't know a wrist lock from a wrist watch, so I had to. This was back in 90, 91, 92, I believe. Yep.
Perfect. So if you allow me, I'll translate this. Jim tuvo una trayectoria bastante distinta al resto de los talentos. Les explico. Él no creció siendo fanático de la lucha libre como tal vez algunos otros lo hubiesen sido. No creció luchando en el living room o en la sala como luchaban otros de los compañeros de la industria. Él la descubrió cambiando de canales, también esos 3 o 4 canales. De momento lo vio, pero no es algo que estaba en sus planes. Una vez le ofrecen entrenar, él entra a la industria, entrena, pero en aquel momento él no sabía nada. O sea, como él dice, no sabía distinguir de un wristlock a un wristwatch. Era un poquito complicado, pero no era fanático de la industria. And you were not a fan, however, you managed to put yourself into a wrestling school for the first time. I believe Steve Kern was the one who trained you and a lot of wrestlers in the area. How was your experience training pro wrestling, and what do you recall of your first bump?
Well, the first bump was very awkward because it's very unintuitive. You don't want to just fall back and just let yourself hit the mat. And I do remember, I guess I would watch and study. I think what was the one in Texas that they had? Was it UAT? No, there was a ESPN wrestling show back in the day at that point, and I can't remember the name, but I know it was out of Texas. Of course, there was WCW to WWF, I guess, WWF. But I used to watch them a lot just to kind of get some knowledge besides what I was learning in the school. And I remember when I had my first match at the Sportatorium in Tampa, my first impression was, I mean, I guess that's a famous place that a lot of people had gone to, the Sportatorium in Tampa. But it was small and rinky-dink, maybe 200 people would be maxed out. And it was kind of slummy, And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is pro wrestling? in this place, this auditorium? I really wasn't that impressed yet because that was just a local organization. But I did end up actually growing to love it. I think my first cool impression was when I went to USWA and they had a little circuit there. And one of the towns they wrestled was Memphis Coliseum. So that was the first big arena, although it was kind of empty. It wasn't a sellout crowd at all by any means, but they had music and a long entranceway to the stage. And that's gotta think where I first got a little bit of chills and go, whoa, this is kind of cool, man. But before that, I was still, what did I get myself into here?
I'll translate this. Ok, Jim entra a la industria. Fue un poquito awkward en un principio porque en su primera lucha, particularmente en el Sportsitorium en Tampa, en Florida, donde luchan muchos talentos. De hecho, nos contaron Jeff Farmer, por ejemplo, luchó ahí, hizo su debut ahí, entre muchos otros. Pero él hace su debut en esa empresa ante 200 personas más o menos. Cuando sale por la arena, por la cortina, es como que no estaba impresionado, no había mucha gente. ¿En qué me metí aquí? Estaba como que un poquito dudoso. No fue hasta que lucha para United States Wrestling Association o USWA en Tennessee que va al Memphis Auditorium por primera vez y ve este revolú de gente en un venue grande que él dice, ok, ya me está gustando esta cosa. After you were in the independent circuit for approximately 2 years.
That again, I'm sorry, what?
You were in the independent circuit for a year and a half, 2 years tops before you got granted, the opportunity to go to the WCW Power Plant. How did that opportunity happen for you?
So let's see here. Yeah, I started in Florida, went to Memphis, came back, and I remember a lot of the guys in Florida were going up to WCW to do TV tapings. And we would go up there, or I actually didn't go up too often. I think I went up, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 times. And that was, I don't know if they still do that today, where they bring jobbers in, to have squash matches with the named stars. But I did that a couple times. Do they still do that now?
Yeah, they still do it.
Okay, so that I guess is how I got my first look from up there. And after one of the matches up there, I think it was Dusty Rhodes that called me back and talked to him for a little bit. And I don't know, a month or 2 later, they brought me up.
Awesome, I'll translate this. Anteriormente en WCW las oportunidades se daban, como tal vez le ocurren a muchas personas ahora, que es que seleccionaban un talento local o un job guy o un talento de hacer trabajo para elevar la estrella principal. Entonces, así es que él obtiene su primera oportunidad en WCW y Dusty Rhodes es quien lo llama después y comienzan entonces a dialogar. What do you recall of that conversation with Dusty Rhodes, for the first time? Did he wanted to pursue you to sign with them or just to go to the power plant? Like, how did that went for you?
There wasn't a lot really even talked about where they wanted to, what they wanted to do or where they wanted to put me. He just asked me what I'm doing right now. And I'm like, hey, I'm not doing much. I was bouncing at a club down there, strip club, 2001, and wrestling whenever I could. So he just said, well, I'll get in touch with you. And I wasn't even sure he was going to call back. But they did call back, I guess, I don't know, 2 to 4 weeks later. And then we made the arrangement to come on up there.
Perfect, I'll translate this. No había nada concreto en aquel momento. Dusty le pregunta como que qué estabas haciendo en ese momento. Pero yo soy un bouncer en un strip club aquí en el área, no estoy haciendo mucho. Y el día pensaba que tal vez no me iban a llamar. Lo llamaron de 2 4 semanas más o menos después y ahí es que comienza esta travesía. Then this way, your pathway on WCW started. What do you recall, of your year or year and a half with WCW when you started with them? How was the opportunity to work for the company in multiple roles? Because you were a talent in the power plant that they were developing, but they also brought you a few times to do different works over there. So how was your experience with the company?
It was good, I guess. I think I was just, not I think, but I know I was just way too green at that point. Or they were going to push me as Jungle Jim, but Jungle Jim was the shits when I was up there. I didn't know enough. Ring savvy or psychology of a match. So I was just like totally green and lost. Had I been, I developed a lot of that in Puerto Rico. Had I had the chance in WCW, maybe 3-4 years later, after I had actually figured out what was going on, I might have been able to carry that better. I would have been able to carry that better. And who knows, maybe I would have stayed up there longer. I would have just had a better opportunity. I was just way too green when I got my push.
Perfect. Jungle Jim Steele nos menciona que cuando comienza con WCW, él estaba muy verde, muy crudo en aquel momento. Ellos querían impulsar a Jungle Jim, pero pues lamentablemente porque estaba muy verde, tal vez no tenía ese conocimiento de la psicología de la lucha, de los in-ring skills, etcétera, etcétera, o de cómo se manejaba el cuadrilátero en general, porque recuerden, llevaba 2 años en esto como mucho, no había visto lucha libre antes. Cuando comienza a verla es para estudiarla, para el cuadrilátero, como él dijo, estudió WWF, y los diferentes territorios en Texas. Pero volviendo a WCW, ellos lo intentaron. Dice, pues si en aquel momento hubiese tenido otra mentalidad, hubiese tenido más experiencia, tal vez hubiese durado más y la experiencia con WCW hubiese sido otra porque el push se hubiese concretado. After a while, you left WCW and you got your opportunity with ECW for a match in 1995, I believe. What do you recall of that opportunity on ECW?
Actually, that would have been later than 95. Well, actually, because my first opportunity after leaving WCW was going to Japan in 94. I know I had gone, my first time to Puerto Rico was like October of 95. And I hadn't done the ECW thing. Must have been 96, 97, 98, maybe. And it was just a squash match against 911. And I think maybe if I would have, what their idea, I think, was that he wanted to just squash Jungle Jim and create another character. And I don't think I liked the character that they wanted to do. Plus I think I was more interested in staying with Japan than I was getting a spot in ECW. That might have been the wrong thinking, I don't know. But so I didn't follow up and stick with them after the squash match against 911.
Perfect. Jungle Jim Steele lucha en ECW en una ocasión, fue un squash match contra 911, que era un talento que tenían, si no me equivoco fue en el evento Barbed Wire Hoodies and Chokeslams, era el evento en donde luchó en ECW. Menciona que fue un poco después del 95, porque ya había llegado a Puerto Rico y estaba haciendo cositas en Japón en aquel momento, pero sí, como que su mentalidad y su prioridad era trabajar más Japón y como que no le dio mucho seguimiento a eso en ECW. You were granted a huge opportunity in your career. You already spoke about it. I'm talking about All Japan Pro Wrestling. You started working for them for a while and did multiple tours with them. Over there, you team up with Dan Spivey, among many other people. What do you recall of your early days in Japan, and specifically, what was the biggest challenge that you faced while being in Japan? The language, the cultural barriers, the food, for example, chasing food. Ahmed Johnson told me a story where Ahmed Johnson told me a story where he bought like an egg and he opened it and it was like the embryo of a duck. It wasn't like a regular egg, and he was like, "What the heck is this this stuff?" Also, how was your experience in Japan?
I don't know. I was very excited to go over there, and I guess I was excited to get there. But then when we were there for a while, we'd be counting the days down until going home. I don't think it would have been as bad now if I had, if when I went over there was more like today's current temperature. As far as when we were over there, we didn't have computers yet. I think computers are just coming out in '95, and we had dial-up, and we still had to use phone cards to call back home, and you would miss food for sure. You would miss, being able to, all you had to could do is talk to your family. But I think it would be much more doable now with computers, internet. I mean, you can FaceTime friends at home, back at home, and stream shows and movies. It would have been much easier, I think, to handle. But after 3 or 4 weeks there, you were about going nuts, ready to get back home. But I actually now I do crave certain foods over there, and I can never quite find the equivalency over here. And I would love to just like be able to time travel and go over there for dinner in Tokyo or something. That would be really awesome.
Awesome. I'll translate this. Él comienza con All Japan Pro Wrestling en mediados de los 90, pongo el 94 aproximadamente, y tiene una corrida bastante sólida allí. Trabaja con muchas personas allí, entre ellos Dan Spivey, entre muchísimas otras personas con las que trabaja allí. E incluso hubo un punto en donde trabajó con Dr. Death, con Steve Williams, pero eso es ya un tema para más adelante. Dice que pues llegabas al punto en donde, ok, quiero irme a Japón, muy contento de irme a Japón, pero cuando llegabas allá, no es esta era, estamos hablando de los 90, las computadoras comenzaron a salir en el 95, en 95, como él dice, y todavía tienes que utilizar los phone cards para poder llamar a alguien, y pues extrañabas tu familia, extrañabas todo. Tal vez estando en esta época hubiese sido diferente porque tenía otras facilidades, pero en aquel momento como que lo extrañaba a su familia una vez llegaba allí. Y lo interesante de esto que él menciona es que pues ahora mismo extraña la comida de Japón, extraña varias cosas y como que le dan ganas de comer algo en específico. Y dice como que si pudiera viajar en el tiempo para poder tener una cena en Tokio como lo hacía antes, definitivamente lo tomaría. You were also a part of, you were with All Japan, I believe, for on and off like 8 years approximately. And after that, you had the opportunity to go to what people consider till this day the main company in Japan, and that's New Japan Pro Wrestling. How was your experience working for them, and what were the principal difference between both brands?
I think New Japan was more like the WWF or WWE of Japan wrestling. It was more flashy and stagey with cool WWE type entrances, and All Japan was more no frills, just good wrestling.
Perfect, I'll translate this. Habían diferencias principales entre ambas empresas. La más importante que él menciona es que New Japan tenía algo más orientado a WWE, a trabajar con la pirotecnia, las entradas, ese tipo de big stage. Y All Japan era más enfocada en el producto de lucha libre. I want to talk about Puerto Rico, man. Like you were huge in Puerto Rico and you started here in the 90s. How did you got approached initially by the company of Carlos Colon and Victor Jovica?
Actually, I think Butcher, Abdullah the Butcher, I don't know, put a word in or gave me the number or told me to send a tape in or something. And so they got it. they called me up. They said, all right, come down. Come down. My first time there was like the middle of October. And they set me in with a one-way ticket, and I wasn't exactly sure how long I was going to stay. I actually just wanted to go in and come back out and do a show. That was it. But they talked me into staying until the end of the year, and worked. I think it was, I can't remember if that was the very first time. I think we worked a little angle where I got hurt. And was out for a while because they knew I was going back to Japan in January. But my very first impression of Puerto Rico, I actually am very fond of Puerto Rico now, but I can remember back in the day before I even started wrestling, maybe when I was younger, I remember watching, seeing the news whenever a hurricane would come through, and they would always, you know, especially if it was coming into Puerto Rico, and they would show down there where everybody's boarding up gas stations or windows, all kind of stuff. And I remember seeing the destruction down there. I'm like, man, who would want to go to Puerto Rico? And then, of course, I went to Puerto Rico, and my first impression was, I don't know, it wasn't a great impression, I don't think, only because of the cultural shock. But you get used to it. But so what I mean is, like, when I got there, Victor Arroyo was the office guy that picked everybody up from the airports. He also drove us to the towns. So all that was taken care of, which was kind of cool. But I remember being a passenger, he picked me up. I think we went right to the office to do some interviews for the upcoming shows. And I remember being a passenger driving to the office, which was in, like, I think it was in whatever the downtown part, maybe it's San Juan, downtown part of San Juan. And I'm like, what the hell? Every place has bars on the windows. Like, that was just very odd to me. And then we're driving, and the driving was like way different than what I was used to in the States. Everybody was like, especially on the highway, it might be a 3-lane highway. People would make lanes out of both shoulders. And it wasn't just like pass them and get back in the lane. It was like, it was okay. Everybody just made, so a 3-lane highway legit became a 5-lane highway. And I'm like, you're not going to get back into them. I mean, they just, so driving was crazy. And then the bars on the window, I'm like, what the fuck? So that took a little getting used to, but looking back on it now, I have lots of fond memories, and I miss Puerto Rico. And it saddened me to see the hurricane, though I can't remember, was it Maria? I don't remember. Maria. It saddened me to see the hurricane go through there and wipe them out for however long that was. So yeah, I have a big part of my heart is for 10 years off and on, I worked there, and for the first October to December, when the end of the season was for them, and then that was let's see, 95, and then I think I actually moved down there. Like, that was my actual address then. After I had gotten married, and I moved back down there March, I think, of 96, and I actually lived there for about a year, and I would just fly to Japan back and forth from there. So yeah, it's a lot of good memories.
I'll translate this. ¿Cómo llega Jungle Jim Steele a Puerto Rico? Él no recuerda si fue que Abdullah de Butcher lo llamó, o él le dio el número, o Abdullah le dio el contacto, o le dijo que enviara un tape. Simplemente Abdullah tuvo que ver en eso. Y él llega a Puerto Rico y él quería estar una sola fecha. Una fecha, llegar a Puerto Rico e irse. Pero le compran un one-way ticket y llega a Puerto Rico. Es como que, pero ¿cuánto tiempo voy a estar si lo que quiero es un show nada más? Y lo convencen que él llegue en octubre para que se quede hasta fin de año en Puerto Rico y allá hacer la historia en donde él se lesiona para poder él regresar con sus compromisos que tenía en Japón. Y estando en Puerto Rico fue completamente distinto porque cuando él iba creciendo él veía, diablo, Puerto Rico, ¿quién quisiera vivir ahí? Ese revolú huracán, porque todo el tiempo, para los que vivimos en Puerto Rico, que nosotros estamos en el Caribe, todo huracán que llega a Estados Unidos pasa usualmente por Puerto Rico, República Dominicana antes. Y veía la destrucción y de momento llega, pues, me toca ir a Puerto Rico, fue a Puerto Rico, y se topa con el choque cultural de que las ventanas, las barras, de toda la gente era como que completamente distinto, pero sobre todo cuenta la historia de la autopista. En Puerto Rico está esta manía de que hay 3 carriles o 3 lanes y de momento tienes 5 carriles porque te va uno por el paseo del otro lado, otro por la salida del otro lado y comienzan todos a cambiarse uno por un lado y otro para el otro y es como que, pero no vas a volver a le dice el conductor, que era Víctor Arroyo, que era el que lo buscaba casi todo el mundo, y ahí le explican un poco de cómo funcionaba Puerto Rico. Se queda en Puerto Rico, le gustó su experiencia, tanto así que él comienza a vivir en Puerto Rico. Él se casó, se mudó a Puerto Rico en marzo y estuvo por un año viviendo aquí. Y todos sus tours en Japón, él salía de Puerto Rico y de Puerto Rico iba entonces a trabajar en Japón. Once you entered to the backstage ambience, you know, in WWC, you were part of a particular era because there were a really few quantity of foreigners that were willing to travel to Puerto Rico at that point. So once you entered to the backstage area and you saw how everything, the politics and everything worked, how was, you know, that experience for you? What do you recall of the backstage policies on your time on WWC?
WCW?
No,
Or
no,
sorry.
WWC in Puerto Rico. We're still in Puerto Rico.
WWC, okay. I mean, I didn't see anything different really from any other promotion. You know, the boys are the boys that hang out. Certain cliques, I guess. Who was there at the same time? Like
Rey Gonzalez, Invader, Carlos.
I'm thinking about American guys that were there too, of course them. But like Skull Von Crush, who is Vito now, right? Or was back? Yeah, I don't think he's wrestling anymore. And then Sean Morley, who was Val Venus.
Shane, Glamour Boy Shane was there
Shane,
as well.
Of course, yep. I think I think actually a lot of the boys live here now in Florida, but I think he was one of the last ones to leave there. He lived there for a long time. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really enjoyed it down there.
Perfect. I'll translate this. Dice que no es muy distinto el ambiente backstage en WWC como era el resto de las empresas. Pues los muchachos siendo los muchachos, tenía sus clics, tenía sus cosas. En aquel momento estaba Skull Von Crush, que era Big Vito. Tenías a Val Venus, que en aquel momento era Sean Morley. Había un grupito de personas, pero era todo bastante similar. You won the WWC Puerto Rican Heavyweight Champion while being here in 2001. What do you recall of that experience working that rivalry with Rey Gonzalez?
Rey Gonzalez was cool, man. He was easy to work. And I think I flew back in and out a couple times, having some big battles with him. Drew some pretty good crowds, but yeah, he's a true professional. Is he still wrestling down there? Are they still running shows?
We are still running shows. WWC is still active in the pandemic taping, but Ray is not active inside the ring yet. Maybe he wants to do it later, but he kind of retired a few years ago silently. Like he never announced anything. He just took a break from wrestling for a while and dedicated himself to his business.
What kind of business is that?
He has a store in his hometown in Dorado. He has a market there.
Okay. Hey, are you down in Puerto Rico right now?
Yeah, I'm on Ponce. I'm on the southern part of the island.
And is things kind of back to normal yet? I mean, after Maria and COVID?
I mean, so after we had Maria, after Maria, we had and I'm not kidding, over 1,000 different earthquakes in 2020. Yeah, it was horrible. And after the earthquakes, we had the pandemic. So things are kind of going back to normal, but then we are in hurricane season again. So
you still have to wear masks down there everywhere?
Yeah, we need to wear a mask inside the stores, but from this Monday, we could remove the mask if you're fully vaccinated in outdoor places. But things are on quote unquote getting back to normal, I guess.
Oh God, I hope so, man.
Well, we're in hurricane season. You were mentioning earlier this, so
yeah.
it is really it is a bad season for us. But yeah, man, how was your experience with with the Puerto Rican crowd itself? Like Puerto Rico has the wah wah, and they're really verbal about how they feel about a match or a particular wrestler. So what do you recall, working the Puerto Rican audience?
Yeah, they're a very passionate crowd. And I get you were talking about how I was really big and over there. I guess I didn't really realize that until I came back. Remember, my first time was October to December of 95. And then, of course, I said I went to Japan. I was off. I think I had actually gotten married. And then by the time I came back was March, right? So January, February, March, so about 3 months. And so they played this angle over and over with me and Bronco, I think was the first big feud. And I didn't realize how crazy over it was until everywhere I would go, didn't matter, the grocery store, the mall, whatever, pumping gas. I'm like, oh shit, these people really pay attention to this shit. And then also when I turned heel, and I actually liked that. That was fun because you could just kind of, be pissed off at the crowd, but their reaction was like, man, that guy just freaking broke their heart, and they were so mad, and they throw piss at you. I mean, they're legitimately, I mean, it almost like they believe the shit for real, even though I'm sure some people, or maybe most of them, knew. I don't know if it really, they just got so into it. I don't know if they even knew if it was entertainment. I think they thought it was a shoot. They thought it was real. That's how mad they would get, literally.
I'll translate this. Jim menciona, obviamente le encantó trabajar con Rey González en su tiempo en Puerto Rico, pero él no sabía que estaba tan over con el público hasta que lo ponen en la rivalidad con Bronco y lo vuelven heel. Él todo el tiempo, él iba a las gasolineras, él iba a los supermarkets, iba a todos lados, como que, Jungle Jim Steele, todo el mundo sabía quién era. Era como que, coño, la gente de verdad está viendo esto, le presta atención. Cuando él se vuelve rudo, ahí él dice que él siente que el público sintió que le rompió el corazón, se estaba como que ellos creían esto completamente, pensaban que era un shoot, no era una historia, y comenzaron a arrojarle orina. En Puerto Rico esta se costumbre, cantos de pedazos de metales, diferentes cosas, pero sí, a John Gold Steel le arrojaron orina mientras estaba trabajando con el Bronco. After a while in your wrestling career, you decided to, to hang your boots. Like, why did that happen? Why did you took that decision, even though you still had so much to give to the wrestling industry?
I don't think it was necessarily my decision. I just think that, people stopped booking me. So, you get to a point where your older, newer guys are coming in, and I was okay with it, I guess. Actually, my last time in Puerto Rico was in 95, and that was my last time in Japan as well, 95. I think July of 95 might have been my last time to Puerto Rico. And yeah.
Well, 95 was the first time, but I'm
sorry, 2005.
But I believe you came. I believe you came here in 2008 as well, it was 20, maybe 2005.
I'm sure, yeah, because it was the same year for both, for Japan and Puerto Rico, 2005. Yes, so thank you for correcting me. That was not 95. That was when I went. 94 to Japan, 95 to Puerto Rico, and 2005 was the last time I wrestled, been in the ring. Hell, I don't even know if I could take a bump anymore.
Oh, you've been out of action for 13 years now. What's the human Jim Steele doing with his life? Like, you are a really hard person to get at this point. You're doing multiple things. Like, do you want to chat with the audience what you're doing in your personal life, or you rather take, keep your life private?
After wrestling, it's I was used to that type of lifestyle of working, and so it was a difficult transition into the regular work life. I'm like, hell, I didn't make enough money to just retire off wrestling. So I worked a sales job at a publishing company at first. And then in 2008, when the economy tanked and mortgages were being foreclosed and companies were closing down, the company I worked for, which was a startup company, they went out of business. And that was the catalyst that got me back into school. I went to school, I became a nurse. I'm a registered nurse now, and I work in the ICU at Advent Health in Bay City.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll translate this. Jim menciona que cuando él se va de la industria de la lucha libre no fue su decisión, simplemente las personas dejaron de programarlo, dejaron de buquearlo poco a poco, porque habían talentos nuevos, etcétera. Y él tuvo como que, pues yo estoy bien con eso. Su último en Puerto Rico fue en el 2005. Y lo interesante de esto que él menciona es que pues en el 2008 hubo una crisis económica en Estados Unidos, el trabajo donde lo estaba, la empresa era un startup company, cerró y decidió entonces ingresar nuevamente a la universidad. Se convirtió en un enfermero, está certificado como enfermero y está trabajando en la unidad de cuidado intensivo en un hospital allí mismo en Florida, y eso es lo que ha dedicado su vida, a cuidar diferentes pacientes de cuidado intensivo en Florida. Jim, before we go to our last question, I wanted to thank you so much for your time, and we don't know you're a busy man, so we really appreciate this. Last but not least, what message can you send to the fans in Puerto Rico, specifically in Latin America, that remember Jungle Jim Steele like someone extremely special in their life? Because man, we saw you growing up, and you were part of our life and part of our culture as well. So what message can you send to the fans out there, specifically Puerto Rico?
Man, I miss you guys, man. I miss the shows. I miss eating some of the pinchos, panadillas before the shows. I actually miss it very much. And I hope I hope that everything gets back to normal after this scandemic goes away. And I call it a scandemic kind of jokingly a little bit, but I think they went way overboard on all the bullshit with COVID. And the hurricane, the last hurricane that wiped you guys out. I just hope everything gets back to normal for you guys. I hope wrestling picks up and you start having more shows. And the bottom line is I miss you guys. I miss Puerto Rico.
We missed you as well, Jim. Once again, thank you very much for your time. It's been an honor to have you here as our guest. And let's wrap it up. Este fue Jungle Jim Steele, WWC, All Japan Pro Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, ECW, WCW y el mundo entero. Y Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en español.